A fragile bond begins. The alien medical facility on Zyphor Prime was a masterpiece of design, where technology and aesthetics melded seamlessly. Its walls shimmered in gradients of teal and silver, and the air was imbued with a subtle, calming hum. In one of the advanced medical bays, Nurse Zelia, a Saurian healer, moved with precision and grace. The Saurians were a race known for their delicate, crystalline physiology and unmatched medical expertise. Their entire culture revolved around harmony and healing, making Zelia a paragon of her kind. Zelia's translucent fingers glided over a hovering holographic interface as she conducted her daily rounds. The room, though serene, was disrupted by a sudden commotion. The bay doors hissed open, and a group of medics burst in, maneuvering a gurney carrying an injured human soldier. "Prepare the regeneration module immediately," one of the medics called out, urgency breaking the usual quiet. Zelia's crystalline eyes widened. Humans were a rarity on Zyphor Prime, their biology still an enigma to the Saurians. Though relations between Earth and the Galactic Union had grown, few humans ventured this far into the galaxy. The human was a young man, his face pale and marred by cuts. Blood seeped through his uniform, staining the pristine surface of the gurney. His breathing was shallow, and his body was riddled with injuries. Fractured ribs, a collapsed lung, and a broken leg bent at an unnatural angle. Zelia guided the medics to the advanced isolation bay. "What happened?" she asked, her voice melodic but tinged with concern. "He's Captain Derek Marsh," the medic replied, "injured during a rescue mission on Clithor 7. The terrain was brutal, and there was an ambush. He managed to save his team, but at great cost." Zelia's brow furrowed. She initiated the scans, her fingers dancing over the interface. The holographic projection revealed the extent of the damage. For a Saurian, such injuries would mean a prolonged recovery, possibly months. Yet, humans were said to possess a peculiar resilience. As Zelia prepared the regeneration nanites, she couldn't help but glance at Derek. His face, though etched with pain, bore a stubborn determination even in unconsciousness. "Humans," she whispered, "what drives you to push so far?" The nanites were injected, and Zelia activated the regeneration module. The air shimmered as the room's gravity adjusted to facilitate healing. Zelia stayed by Derek's side, monitoring his vitals. Hours passed, and though the machines worked tirelessly, the human's condition remained critical. Suddenly, a faint groan escaped Derek's lips. His eyelids fluttered, and his fingers twitched. Zelia gasped softly. A Saurian would have remained unconscious for days in such a state, yet this human was fighting to wake up. "Captain Derek," she said gently, leaning closer. "Can you hear me?" His eyes opened, unfocused but alive. He blinked, his gaze finally locking onto hers. "Where am I?" he rasped, his voice weak but clear. "You're on Zyphor Prime, in our medical bay," Zelia replied, her voice soothing. "You're safe now, but you must rest." Derek attempted a faint smile. "Safe, that's new," he muttered before slipping back into unconsciousness. Zelia stared at him, marveling at the tenacity of this fragile yet indomitable being. She vowed to uncover the secret of human resilience, even as she felt an unfamiliar admiration growing within her crystalline heart. Against all odds, the days on Zyphor Prime followed a meticulous rhythm. For Nurse Zelia, each moment in the medical bay was calculated, every action precise. Yet, as she observed the human patient, Captain Derek Marsh, she found her routine subtly disrupted. He was unlike any being she had cared for before. His biology was a riddle, and his spirit, even more so, seemed to defy logic. Derek's recovery was far from conventional. The nanites Zelia had administered worked tirelessly, knitting torn muscle, repairing fractured bones, and regenerating damaged tissue. But the human body reacted unpredictably. The nanites encountered resistance from his immune system, which fought the foreign agents as though they were invaders. Despite this, Derek's vital signs were improving at a pace Zelia found astonishing. By the third day, Derek opened his eyes fully for the first time. His gaze swept the room, taking in the glowing consoles, the shimmering walls, and Zelia's crystalline figure standing nearby. "You're awake again," Zelia said, stepping closer. Her voice was calm, but her crystalline features betrayed a flicker of amazement. Derek tried to sit up but winced, his body protesting. "What happened? Last I remember, we were pinned down." "You sustained severe injuries during the rescue mission," Zelia explained, gently pressing a hand against his shoulder to guide him back down. "Your body has been through immense trauma. You must rest." "Rest?" Derek smirked weakly. "Not really my thing." Zelia's translucent face softened, though she struggled to hide her disbelief. "You humans, why do you always resist recovery? Your body is fragile, yet your will seems unbreakable." Derek let out a raspy chuckle, though it quickly turned into a wince. "Fragile? Maybe. But we're built for bouncing back. My team, did they make it?" "They are safe," Zelia assured him. "Your actions ensured their survival." The relief that washed over Derek's face was unmistakable. "Good," he muttered, his voice tinged with exhaustion. Zelia marveled at the shift in his expression. Despite his pain and weakened state, his concern for his team outweighed his own suffering. It was a trait she rarely encountered in her kind. The Saurians valued collective well-being, but they lacked the fierce, almost reckless selflessness Derek exhibited. Over the next few days, Zelia witnessed Derek's recovery firsthand. He insisted on sitting up, then standing, despite her protests. Every movement was a struggle, every step an ordeal. Yet he refused to remain bedridden. "You're stubborn," Zelia remarked one evening as Derek leaned heavily on a support rail, attempting to walk the length of the medical bay. "That's one word for it," Derek replied, beads of sweat forming on his brow. "Back home, they call it grit." "Grit?" Zelia tilted her head, intrigued. "It's determination," Derek explained. "The refusal to quit, even when the odds are stacked against you." Zelia pondered his words. Among her kind, resilience was seen as a function of biology, a body's ability to endure. But with humans, resilience seemed rooted in something deeper, something intangible. That night, as Derek rested, Zelia reviewed his medical data. The progress was undeniable. His fractured ribs had fused, his lung was functioning again, and even his shattered leg was mending at a rate that defied expectation. Still, Zelia couldn't shake the feeling that his rapid recovery wasn't solely due to the advanced technology at her disposal. The next morning, Derek was sitting upright, his face pale but resolute. He was fiddling with a makeshift crutch he had fashioned from a medical bay tool. "You shouldn't be out of bed," Zelia chided as she approached. Derek grinned, his teeth showing through his exhaustion. "You can't keep me down forever, nurse. Besides, I need to be ready." "Ready for what?" Zelia asked, folding her arms. "For what comes next," he replied, his tone serious now. "I know my team is safe, but the mission's not over. They'll need me out there." Zelia stared at him, her crystalline eyes narrowing. "You are barely standing, Captain Marsh. If you return to the field in this condition, you could undo all the progress you've made." "And if I don't?" Derek countered, his voice firm. "If I stay here while they face danger alone, then what was the point of surviving in the first place?" The sincerity in his words struck Zelia deeply. She had always believed in the logic of healing, the necessity of rest. But here was a being willing to risk everything for the sake of others. It was illogical. It was reckless. Yet it was undeniably inspiring. For the first time, Zelia found herself questioning the rigid principles of her training. Perhaps there was more to healing than repairing the body. Perhaps it was about nurturing the spirit, the drive that made survival meaningful. "I will not stop you," Zelia said at last, her tone softening. "But if you insist on pushing yourself, I will be there to ensure you do not fall." Derek smiled again, this time with genuine warmth. Thanks, Nurse Zelia. You're not so bad for an alien. Zelia tilted her head, unsure whether to take his comment as a compliment. And you, Captain Marsh, are not so bad for a human. As the artificial lights dimmed to simulate night, Zelia sat by Derek's bedside, her mind swirling with thoughts. Humans were fragile, yes, but their resilience, their determination, made them something extraordinary. She had much to learn from this strange and stubborn species, and for the first time, she was eager to discover what lay beyond the bounds of her understanding. The unyielding spirit. The medical bay was quiet, save for the soft hum of the monitors and the faint whir of automated drones performing routine maintenance. Nurse Zelia, seated near Derek's bed, reviewed the day's data on her holographic tablet. Derek's vitals showed steady improvement, but the human was far from a full recovery. His determination to push himself, however, seemed boundless. The silence broke as Derek stirred, shifting in his bed with a groan. His eyes fluttered open, catching Zelia's gaze. "Morning," he rasped, though the artificial lighting made no distinction between night and day. "You should be resting," Zelia said, her melodic voice carrying a hint of exasperation. "Your body is still fragile." Derek smirked, propping himself up on his elbows despite the protest from his healing ribs. "Fragile? You keep using that word, but I'm still here, aren't I?" Zelia tilted her head, studying him. "That you are. But your persistence baffles me. Most beings in your condition would be content to let the medical staff handle their recovery." "Most beings probably don't have people depending on them," Derek replied, his voice firm despite the strain. Zelia hesitated, curiosity flickering in her crystalline eyes. "You speak often of your team. Why are they so important to you?" Derek shifted slightly, wincing as he adjusted his position. "Back home, we have this thing called loyalty. It's not just about working together. It's about standing by each other, no matter what. My team isn't just a group of soldiers, they're family. And family means you don't give up on them." Zelia considered his words, the concept of loyalty resonating in a way she hadn't anticipated. Among the Saurians, loyalty was tied to their collective well-being, a logical adherence to the needs of the many. But Derek's loyalty seemed rooted in something deeper, something emotional. "And if you were to fall while aiding them," Zelia asked carefully, "would your sacrifice truly serve them?" Derek's gaze met hers, steady and unwavering. "Sometimes it's not about the outcome. It's about the effort, the choice to stand up when it matters, even if it costs you. That's what makes us human." Zelia fell silent, absorbing his words. She had never encountered a perspective so foreign yet so profound. The Saurians valued survival above all, but Derek's resilience seemed fueled by something beyond mere survival. It was purpose. As the hours passed, Derek insisted on testing his limits. With Zelia's reluctant assistance, he managed to stand, leaning heavily on the makeshift crutch he had cobbled together. His steps were halting and slow, but each one was a triumph. "You're impossibly stubborn," Zelia remarked, walking beside him as he navigated the length of the bay. "That's what my mom always said," Derek replied, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "She used to say I had a thick skull and a thicker will." Zelia couldn't help but chuckle softly. "Your mother sounds like a wise individual." "She was," Derek said, his tone turning wistful. "She raised me to believe that no matter how hard things get, there's always a reason to keep going. Always someone counting on you." Zelia's crystalline heart felt a pang of something unfamiliar, a mix of admiration and a longing to understand this unyielding human spirit. She found herself asking, "What drives you to care so deeply for others, even at your own expense?" Derek paused, leaning against the wall to catch his breath. "Because that's what life is about. It's not just existing. It's making a difference for the people around you. It's knowing that when it's all said and done, you didn't just live for yourself." Zelia was quiet, his words lingering in her mind. She had spent her life dedicated to healing, but her motivations had always been tied to logic and duty. Derek's perspective was something entirely different, something profoundly selfless. By the end of the day, Derek had managed several laps around the bay with Zelia's support. His body, though still weak, seemed to respond to his determination, defying the limitations she had assumed were absolute. As Zelia helped him back into bed, she said, "You are unlike anyone I have ever met, Captain Derek Marsh." "Is that a compliment or a warning?" he asked with a grin, though his exhaustion was evident. "Perhaps both," Zelia replied, her crystalline features softening. "You challenge everything I thought I knew about resilience. Your strength is remarkable." Derek's smile faded slightly, replaced by a look of quiet sincerity. "It's not just strength, Nurse Zelia. It's hope. That's what keeps us going, even when things seem impossible." Zelia nodded, the weight of his words settling over her. Hope. It was a concept the Saurians rarely explored, yet it seemed to be the cornerstone of human resilience. She made a silent vow to learn more, not just about human biology, but about the essence of what made them extraordinary. As the artificial lights dimmed for the simulated night, Zelia remained by Derek's side, her mind a whirlwind of questions and revelations. She had always believed her role was to mend the body, but Derek had shown her that healing the spirit was just as vital. For the first time in her life, Zelia felt inspired, not by logic or duty, but by the indomitable will of a fragile yet extraordinary being. Bonds beyond biology. The artificial dawn in the medical bay painted the room in hues of soft gold and silver, a calming simulation of morning on Sci-Fi Prime. Derek stirred awake, his body still aching but noticeably stronger. Nurse Zelia was already nearby, reviewing his latest scans. Her crystalline figure shimmered in the gentle light, reflecting a quiet diligence that had become familiar over the past days. "Good morning, Captain Derek," Zelia said as she approached his bed. Her melodic voice carried a subtle warmth, though her tone remained professional. "You've shown remarkable progress overnight. Your fractured ribs have nearly mended, and your lung is functioning at full capacity." Derek grinned, the spark of humor evident in his eyes despite the lingering fatigue. "Guess I'm tougher than I look, huh?" "Indeed," Zelia replied, though her crystalline brow furrowed slightly. "Your recovery rate continues to defy our expectations, but it is not only your physical resilience that intrigues me. It is the force of your determination." Derek propped himself up, the movement easier now than it had been days before. "Determination. That's just a fancy way of saying I'm too stubborn to stay down." Zelia's lips curved into a faint smile. "Perhaps, but it is a trait unique to your kind. The Saurians value survival, yet we lack the relentless drive that you humans seem to possess." Derek studied her for a moment, his curiosity piqued. "What about you? You've been here every step of the way, keeping me alive. That takes a kind of determination, doesn't it?" Zelia hesitated. She hadn't thought of her work in that way before. For her, caring for patients was a duty, a logical extension of her role within the Saurian society. But Derek's words made her pause. Was there more to her dedication than duty? "I suppose I have never considered it," Zelia admitted. "Our culture views medicine as an obligation to the collective. Individual resilience, like yours, is uncommon among us." Derek leaned back against the pillows, his gaze thoughtful. "Maybe that's what makes us good partners. We've got strengths you don't, and you've got things we could learn from." Zelia tilted her head, intrigued. "Partnerships like ours are rare. The Galactic Union still debates the value of including humanity in intergalactic initiatives. Many believe your species is too young, too reckless." Derek chuckled softly, though the sound was tinged with irony. "Yeah, we get that a lot. But sometimes recklessness is just another way of saying we're willing to take risks others won't." Zelia pondered his words. Humans had indeed shown a willingness to venture into the unknown, to challenge boundaries. It was a quality that often led to conflict, but also to profound discoveries. "Tell me, Captain," Zelia said, her crystalline eyes meeting his. What drives you to risk so much for others? Your injuries are severe, yet your concern remains with your team. Derek's expression softened, a hint of vulnerability breaking through his usual humor. Because they'd do the same for me. Out there, in the chaos, all you've got is each other. That kind of bond. It's not just about survival. It's about trust, about knowing someone's got your back no matter what. Zelia nodded slowly. The concept of trust, so deeply ingrained in human relationships, was something she found both foreign and fascinating. Among the Saurians, trust was a logical construct, rooted in predictability and shared goals. But for humans, it seemed far more personal, far more emotional. As the day progressed, Derek insisted on resuming his physical therapy. With Zelia's reluctant assistance, he moved through a series of exercises, his steps more stable and his endurance growing. Though his body protested, he pushed forward, his determination unwavering. "You're doing well," Zelia observed as Derek completed another lap around the bay. "Your recovery is accelerating." "Good," Derek said, pausing to catch his breath. "Because I've got a mission to finish." Zelia sighed, a mix of admiration and frustration in her tone. "You are impossible, Captain. But I am beginning to understand why." "Oh yeah." Derek grinned, leaning on the support rail. "What's your diagnosis, Doc?" Zelia's crystalline lips curved into a rare smile. "You humans are driven by more than biology. It is your connections, your bonds with one another, that fuel your resilience. You heal not just for yourself, but for those you care about." Derek nodded, his expression serious now. "That's what it's all about. If we didn't have each other, what's the point?" Zelia fell silent, his words resonating deeply. She had always approached healing as a matter of science, a precise application of knowledge and technology. But Derek was teaching her that healing was also about purpose, about the will to fight for something greater than oneself. That evening, as the artificial lights dimmed once more, Zelia found herself reflecting on the past days. Derek's presence had challenged her understanding of resilience, of healing, of what it meant to truly care for another being. "Thank you, Nurse Zelia," Derek said quietly as he settled into bed. "For everything." Zelia glanced at him, her crystalline features softening. "It is my duty, Captain. But I am learning that it is also my privilege." As Derek drifted into a restless sleep, Zelia remained by his side, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The bond between them, alien and human, was growing stronger, built not on logic, but on mutual respect and understanding. For the first time, Zelia realized that healing wasn't just about mending broken bodies. It was about fostering hope, about nurturing the unyielding spirit that made beings like Derek Marsh so extraordinary. The fragile strength of hope. The artificial lights of the medical bay glowed faintly, mimicking the soft hues of twilight. Nurse Zelia stood by the observation console, reviewing Derek's latest medical scans. His progress was undeniable. The nanites had worked tirelessly, aided by his seemingly unrelenting immune system. His once shattered ribs were now whole, his damaged lung had fully regenerated, and even his fractured leg was stabilizing. By all accounts, Derek Marsh was a miracle of healing. But it wasn't just his body that fascinated Zelia. It was his spirit. The human captain had become a puzzle she couldn't stop trying to solve. "Morning, nurse." Derek's familiar voice broke her concentration. She turned to see him sitting on the edge of his bed, a grin spread across his face, or whatever you call this time of day. "Good morning, Captain," Zelia replied, her voice carrying its usual melodic calm. "You seem eager. I trust that doesn't mean you're planning to ignore my instructions again." Derek chuckled, shaking his head. "Come on, Zelia. You've seen my progress. I'm practically back to full strength." Zelia raised a translucent brow, skepticism glimmering in her crystalline features. "Practically. You're still leaning on that makeshift crutch like it's an extra limb." Derek shrugged, his grin unwavering. "Details." She sighed, though there was a trace of amusement in her expression. Over the past days, their exchanges had grown less formal. Zelly had found herself drawn to Derek's humor, his unshakable optimism, and the sheer determination that radiated from him. It was a stark contrast to the reserved, methodical nature of her own species. As Derek stood and began his daily exercises, Zelia walked beside him, her hands ready to steady him if he stumbled. He moved with slow but deliberate steps, his focus sharp despite the lingering pain in his muscles. "Tell me," Zelia began as they paced the length of the bay, "what is it that keeps you so driven? You speak often of your team, but there must be more." Derek paused, leaning against the support rail as he caught his breath. "It's not just my team," he said, his voice quieter now. "It's everything we stand for. Back home, humanity's had its share of struggles, wars, disasters, you name it. But we always find a way to pull through. It's like, every time we get knocked down, we get back up stronger." Zelia tilted her head, intrigued. "Resilience, then. But why? What gives you that strength?" Derek's gaze drifted for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Hope," he said simply. "Even when things look impossible, we keep going because we believe there's something better waiting on the other side." Zelia was silent, the weight of his words settling over her. Hope was a concept she had rarely contemplated. For the Saurians, life was a cycle of logic and efficiency. They healed because it was their duty, their purpose. But Derek's hope was something more profound, an emotional force that seemed to defy logic entirely. "Do you not hope, Nurse Zelia?" Derek asked, pulling her from her thoughts. She hesitated, unsure how to answer. "We do not hope as you do," she admitted. "Our motivations are rooted in practicality. Hope, as you describe it, is unfamiliar to us." Derek smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why we make a good team. You've got the skills and the tech, and we've got the stubbornness and hope to push through." Zelia couldn't help but smile back, though her mind remained restless. Derek's words had planted a seed of curiosity within her, a desire to understand not just his biology, but his humanity. Later that evening, as the bay settled into its simulated night cycle, Zelia found herself sitting by Derek's bedside. He had fallen asleep after another round of grueling exercises, his breathing steady but labored. She studied his face, noting the lines of fatigue and the faint scar above his brow. Her gaze shifted to the monitors displaying his vitals. His recovery was unprecedented, even by human standards. Yet, as remarkable as his physical progress was, Zelia knew it was his spirit that truly set him apart. It was as though his willpower itself was driving his healing. "Captain Derek Marsh," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "You are teaching me things I did not know I needed to learn." The soft hum of the medical bay filled the silence as Zelia leaned back, her crystalline features reflecting the faint light. For the first time in her career, she felt a spark of something beyond duty, a connection, a bond with her patient that transcended the boundaries of their species. The next morning, Derek was up and moving before Zelia arrived. She found him standing by the observation window, gazing out at the planet's crystalline skyline. "Couldn't wait for me to get here," she teased, though her tone held a hint of concern. Derek turned, his grin as infectious as ever. "Just wanted to see what's out there. It's a beautiful place you've got here." Zelia joined him, her gaze following his. "Zyphor Prime has always been a sanctuary for my kind, but I wonder if we have grown too comfortable, too disconnected from the struggles that shape other beings." "Maybe," Derek said, his voice thoughtful. "But that doesn't mean you can't change. You're learning, right? About us, about resilience." Zelia nodded slowly. "Yes, and I believe I still have much to learn." Derek placed a hand on her shoulder, a human gesture that startled her at first, but quickly felt natural. "We all do. That's what makes life worth living." As the day progressed, Zelia helped Derek prepare for the next stage of his recovery. His determination was as strong as ever, but now, Zelia found herself drawing inspiration from him. His hope, his resilience, and his unyielding spirit were teaching her lessons that no medical training ever could. For the first time in her life, Zelia began to hope, not just for her patient's recovery, but for the possibilities that lay beyond the boundaries of her understanding. A shared mission. The medical bay was alive with activity as Derek's recovery reached a critical milestone. Nurse Zelia, standing beside him, observed as he navigated the room with a renewed sense of purpose. His makeshift crutch was now more for balance than necessity, and though his steps were slow and deliberate, each one was a triumph. "You've made remarkable progress," Zelia said, her tone both professional and genuinely impressed. "A few days ago, you could barely stand." Derek smirked, wiping sweat from his brow. "What can I say? We humans don't stay down for long." Zelia folded her arms, studying him. "Your resilience continues to defy my understanding. It's not just your physical recovery, it's the drive behind it. You seem relentless." "Relentless," Derek repeated with a chuckle. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is," Zelia replied, her crystalline features softening. "Though it also concerns me. You push yourself harder than any patient I've encountered. Even now, when rest would serve you best, you insist on moving forward." Derek paused, leaning against a nearby console. His expression turned serious. "It's not just about me, Zelia. There's still a mission out there. My team might be safe for now, but we're not done. I need to be ready when they need me." Zelia's translucent eyes reflected a mix of admiration and concern. "Your loyalty to them is admirable, but your body has limits, Captain. Even with your remarkable recovery, you are not invincible." "Maybe not," Derek admitted, "but if I don't push through, who will? My team's counting on me." Zelia was quiet for a moment, his words resonating deeply. The concept of loyalty, of self-sacrifice for the sake of others, was something she had observed in Derek from the start. But now she began to understand its depth, a connection so profound that it transcended logic and reason. As the day progressed, Zelia introduced Derek to a new stage of rehabilitation. The facility's advanced simulation room allowed patients to test their strength and endurance in controlled environments. For Derek, it was an opportunity to prepare for the challenges awaiting him beyond the medical bay. The simulation room shimmered to life, projecting a holographic landscape of rugged terrain. Derek stood at the edge, gripping his crutch as he surveyed the scene. "This looks familiar," he said, his voice laced with a mix of excitement and determination. "You modeled this after Clithor 7, didn't you?" Zelia nodded. "It was the site of your mission, was it not? I thought it might provide a realistic environment for your recovery." Derek gave her a small smile. "You're getting the hang of this whole human thing, nurse." The simulation began, and Derek moved carefully through the terrain. Zelia watched closely, ready to intervene if needed. The holographic cliffs and uneven ground mirrored the real environment where Derek had sustained his injuries. Yet he pressed on, his focus unwavering. "You're pushing yourself harder than ever," Zelia observed as he scaled a simulated incline. "That's the point," Derek replied, pausing to catch his breath. "If I can handle this, I can handle anything out there." Zelia couldn't argue with his logic, though her concern for his well-being remained. She followed him closely, offering support when his steps faltered. Despite his progress, she knew the path ahead would not be easy. After the simulation concluded, Derek collapsed onto a bench, sweat glistening on his brow. Zelia handed him a hydration vial, her crystalline features reflecting quiet admiration. "You performed exceptionally," she said, "but I still question whether you are ready to face the dangers beyond this facility." Derek looked at her, his expression serious. "Zelia, I might never feel completely ready, but sometimes you just have to act. Waiting for the perfect moment means you might miss the one that matters." His words struck a chord within her. The Saurians valued precision and timing. Yet Derek's philosophy was one of adaptability, of seizing opportunities as they arose. It was a mindset that fascinated and challenged her. That evening, as they sat in the medical bay, Derek spoke of Earth. He described its sprawling cities, its unpredictable weather, and the resilience of its people. Zelly listened intently, her curiosity growing with every word. Back home, Derek said, his voice softer now, we have this saying, no man is an island. It means we're all connected, and we're stronger together. That's what drives me, knowing that my actions, no matter how small, can make a difference for someone else. Zelia nodded slowly, his words echoing in her mind. The idea of interconnectedness, of finding strength in unity, was both familiar and foreign to her. Among the Saurians, the collective was valued, but it lacked the personal, emotional ties that seemed to fuel humans like Derek. You are teaching me more than I expected, Captain, Zelia admitted. About resilience, about hope, about the strength of bonds. Derek smiled, his exhaustion evident, but his spirit unbroken. And you're keeping me alive to prove it. I'd say we make a pretty good team. As the lights dimmed once more, Zelia found herself reflecting on their journey together. The bond they had formed was unlike anything she had experienced, a connection built on trust, respect, and a shared determination to overcome the odds. For the first time, Zelia began to see the potential for something greater than herself, something that transcended the boundaries of species and culture. Together, she and Derek were forging a path toward understanding, one step at a time. The road forward. The artificial dawn of Zyphor Prime bathed the medical bay in a warm golden light, signaling the start of another day. Derek Marsh was no longer confined to his bed, or even the support of his crutch. Though his steps were slow and his body still bore the weight of his injuries, his determination had carried him further than Zelia had thought possible. Standing by the observation window, Zelia watched as Derek moved through another rehabilitation session in the simulation room. The holographic landscape had been adjusted to include more dynamic obstacles, forcing him to adapt his movements. She marveled at his persistence, the way he pushed through each challenge with grit and resolve. You're overdoing it, Zelia said as she entered the room after his session. Derek was seated on a bench, catching his breath. Again. Derek smirked, wiping sweat from his brow. If I had a credit for every time you said that, I'd be rich by now. Zelia sighed but couldn't suppress a faint smile. And yet you continue to ignore my advice. I don't ignore it, Derek corrected. I just selectively apply it. Zelia's crystalline features softened. Over the days they had spent together, she had come to understand him more deeply. Derek's drive wasn't just about completing a mission or proving his strength. It was about fulfilling a responsibility he felt to those around him, even at great personal cost. You are almost ready to leave this facility, Zelia said, her voice carrying a mixture of pride and apprehension. But I must ask, are you prepared for what awaits you? Derek leaned back against the bench, his gaze thoughtful. Physically, maybe. Mentally, always. I've got people counting on me, Zelia. I can't let them down. Zelia tilted her head, studying him. Your sense of duty is admirable, but it comes at great risk to yourself. Have you considered that your team might value your survival as much as you value theirs? Derek looked at her, his expression serious. I have. But out there, in the field, it's not just about survival. It's about trust. They know I'll show up for them, just like I know they'd do the same for me. That's what keeps us going. Zelia nodded slowly. She had spent her life adhering to the principles of logic and efficiency, but Derek's perspective had shown her a different kind of strength, one rooted in connection and purpose. Later that evening, Zelia found herself preparing Derek's final medical assessment. His recovery was nothing short of extraordinary. The fractures had healed, his muscle tone had returned, and his endurance was nearly at its pre-injury levels. Yet, as she reviewed the data, she couldn't shake a lingering sense of unease. Something on your mind? Derek asked, noticing her quiet demeanor. Zelia glanced up from the console. Your recovery is complete, but I find myself reluctant to release you. Derek raised an eyebrow, a hint of humor in his tone. "You're going to miss me, aren't you?" Zelia's lips curved into a rare smile. "Perhaps. But more than that, I worry about the challenges you will face. Your resilience is remarkable, but even you have limits." Derek stood, his movements steady and confident. "Limits are meant to be tested. You've taught me a lot, Zelia, about precision, patience, and the importance of care. And I hope I've shown you a little bit about what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself." "You have," Zelia admitted, "more than you realize." The next morning, Derek stood at the exit of the medical bay, his gear packed and his resolve clear. Zelia joined him, her crystalline features reflecting a mixture of pride and sadness. "You are ready," she said, her voice steady. "But promise me you will take care of yourself." Derek grinned. "You sound like my mom." "Your mother must be a wise woman," Zelia replied with a hint of warmth. "She is," Derek said. "And so are you." For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of their shared journey hanging between them. Finally, Derek extended his hand, a human gesture of gratitude and respect. Zelia hesitated briefly before taking it, her translucent fingers closing around his. "Thank you, Nurse Zelia," Derek said, his voice earnest, "for everything." "You are most welcome, Captain Derek Marsh," Zelia replied. "May your journey be safe and your mission successful." As Derek stepped through the exit and into the bustling corridors of the facility, Zelia watched him go, her crystalline heart heavy yet hopeful. She had learned more from him than she ever thought possible about resilience, hope, and the unbreakable bonds that connected beings across the stars. For the first time in her life, Zelia felt a spark of something new. It wasn't just admiration or curiosity, it was hope. Hope for the possibilities of unity, for the strength found in diversity, and for the profound impact of a single, determined spirit. As the doors closed behind Derek, Zelia turned back to her work, a quiet smile on her face. She had witnessed something extraordinary, and she knew her life, and her understanding of resilience, would never be the same.